Okay, look, just in general, I've kind of felt a bit pessimistic about where the MCU has been heading towards, basically since the end of Endgame. Like, I even had a video in my head just talking about some of my worries about the MCU, mostly regarding the two new Avengers movies coming out next year. And sure, there's been some projects since Endgame that I've actually enjoyed quite a lot, but there's been nothing that's really made me really excited about what's gonna happen next regarding this cinematic universe. That was until I watched Thunderbolts. Asterisk. Also spoilers. When Thunderbolts was announced in 2022, I legitimately had no desire to watch it, at least not in theaters. Not because the team concept was so much different compared to the comics like some people did. Truthfully, I don't really care about them in the comics that much either, but mainly just because I couldn't care less about a single one of these characters just based off their previous film appearances. At face value, this roster seemed like a bunch of characters picked out of a hat from a random assortment of projects with widely varying receptions. But in hindsight, that was probably intentional. From the moment I saw the actual advertising for this film, something gave me the impression that this wasn't going to be like the typical Marvel experience. And after finding out that the film's director was Jake Schreier, who is an executive producer and one of the directors of the Netflix show Beef, that's probably when I knew that the film was going to be in good hands. If you're unfamiliar with the show Beef, it's a dark dramedy series about two strangers whose road rage incident spirals into a deeply personal and emotionally volatile feud. The show masterfully peels back layers of anger, loneliness, and trauma, revealing how broken people often seek connections, but sometimes in the most destructive ways. And I think it's pretty apparent that that same emotional DNA seemed to have carried over into Thunderbolts. Going back to their past projects, the characters in this film have all been characterized as a bunch of lost and severely broken individuals who just slipped through the cracks, all attempting to either run or atone for their past mistake. They were brought together by circumstance, gradually forming bonds that help them confront their past mistakes and support each other's growth. And I think that's one of the most appealing things about this film to me, just how grounded and human the story is. If you know me, then you know I watch a lot of shit with superheroes in it, but not very often do I see the characters in them be this human and show them openly struggling with such real emotions and feelings. From Yelena's isolation and grief over the loss of her sister, to Bucky still being haunted by his past actions as the Winter Soldier, to Walker still being a shitty person attempting to grapple with the consequences of his actions as Captain America. All these characters are unified, not by some sense of heroic virtue, but instead a bond based on shared experiences. One of the things that I think stands out the most to viewers, especially if you're familiar with the MCU, would be the chemistry and the really authentic banter between all these characters. The cast interactions just gelled so naturally for me, maybe because we watch these characters progressively grow to care for one another. And I really gotta emphasize that this film should not have worked at all. And yet, all the pieces just kinda seem to just end up fitting together. I think the most obvious example of this is the role of the Sentry in the film. In the comics, the Sentry was introduced as Marvel's secret first superhero, and basically their answer to Superman. A hero with all the power in the world, but with a twist. The Sentry, or Bob, suffers from multiple mental illnesses like schizophrenia, anxiety, and dissociative identity disorder, which in normal cases can be tough for anybody to deal with. But in Bob's case, it accumulates in the Void, his dark alter ego. With every heroic act that Bob does as the Sentry, he commits an equally evil one as the Void. He's essentially his own arch enemy. Things got so bad that the only way to stop him was to erase the mind of everybody in the world, including himself. That's why I was so intrigued about how they would adapt him when I learned he was gonna be in the film. Obviously, like most adaptations, liberties are taken with the characters, but I think the changes fit the established world of the MCU a lot better, as opposed to trying to gaslight the entire audience that he was in the first Avengers film or something. In the movie, Bob is shown as a man haunted by all the trauma throughout his life and struggling with depression, leading him to volunteer for the Sentry program in hopes of making something better for his life. However, a side effect of the procedure was amplifying all his trauma and negative emotions, manifesting in this interpretation of the Void, a physical representation of Bob's depression and inner demons, creating a metaphysical space where individuals confront their deepest regrets and fears. There's been some criticisms that this film's take on depression is a bit too on the nose, but honestly, it's such a welcoming change to even see topics like this even touched upon in superhero media. I really have to emphasize again that this film should not have worked as well as it did, man. Just about everything from this film is such a breath of fresh air compared to a lot of Marvel's recent output. Like even down to the fact that the final conflict of the film isn't resolved with some grand scale fight with the main villain, but instead just an intimate embrace showing that they're there for their friend in need. This film is just filled to the brim with a lot of creative storytelling choices that all just really clicked for me. And sure, it's not some perfect magnum opus of a film, and it honestly has some pacing issues, especially around the middle. But more often than not, I always pick the movie with personality over one that's structurally perfect but plays it safe. And that right there is one of the major reasons why this film just works so well the way it does. It isn't playing things safe. Instead of trying to play into the typical superhero norms like so many other movies in the genre often do, it embraces rarely talked about intimate topics in this genre of film, like discomfort, vulnerability, and the messiness of healing. It's a film about broken people finding pieces of themselves in each other, and in doing so, it breaks the mold of what an MCU film has to be. I legitimately had no intention of making this video before actually watching Thunderbolts. But I suppose that's just a testament to how good this film actually was. Like my whole family was able to watch this film and everybody enjoyed it. Even my dad, and the only movies he watches are shitty Nigerian movies off YouTube. For the first time in a long time, I actually left an MCU movie not just satisfied, but genuinely excited. Excited for what's next. Excited by the idea that maybe, just maybe, this universe still has new creative stories left to tell. Appreciate you guys staying till the end. I'm still pretty shocked by just how much I actually enjoyed this film, which makes it suck a bit more that the movie isn't actually doing as well as it could. I don't know, hopefully Marvel keeps up this momentum with Fantastic Four in a little bit, but until next time, like, comment, and subscribe because that really helps a lot, and I'll talk to you guys later. Peace.